Thank you and good afternoon, everyone. My name is Shannon Maynard and I'm the Executive Director of the Congressional Hunger Center. We fight hunger by developing leaders through our Bill Emerson and Mickey Leland Hunger Fellowships, Zero Hunger Internship, and our online education and advocacy hub, Zero Hunger Academy. We strive to engage leaders, especially leaders of color and leaders who've experienced hunger and poverty, in bridging the gap between field and policy, communities and Congress, theory and practice. Having been an Emerson National Hunger Fellow back in the late 1990s, I came full circle when I rejoined the Hunger Center 5 years ago as its executive director. And it's a relief to finally no longer be introduced as the new Ed Cooney, my predecessor, even though I have immense appreciation for Ed's contributions to the anti-hunger movement and the Hunger Center. And when I attend gatherings like the summit and see other program alums leading conversations, leading important work across this movement, it reminds me of the importance of our mission. This is a time of transition for many established anti-hunger organizations with leadership changes at the top. And I think we can all agree that leadership matters. We can have all the talent and resources in the world at our disposal, but we will not solve hunger in our lifetimes without effective leadership. So it's my privilege to moderate this panel, the Vanguard of the anti-hunger movement, and share the virtual stage with 4 leaders of 4 organizations who are paving a way to the day where every person can have access to affordable, nutritious, and culturally appropriate food. Please join me in welcoming the president of Bread for the World, the Reverend Eugene Cho, CEO of Feeding America, Claire Babineaux-Fontenot, President of the Food Research and Action Center, Luis Guardia, and the Executive Director of the Alliance to End Hunger, Eric Mitchell. Let's start with you, Eric, since you're the newest in your role and the Alliance is hosting the summit, but each of you are going to get your turn at answering this question. How do you see your organization contributing to the current landscape of work on food security in this country?
Thanks, Shannon, for the question. And before I begin, I just want to give you a shout out for the work that the Congressional Hunger Center is doing in really building a new generation of anti-hunger advocates, both in the US as well as globally. We've worked with you all for years. Although I'm new to the Alliance, I'm not new to this mission. I was with Bread for the World for quite a time and I was on your board, so I know the work that you do. And I just wanted to commend you for it. Also, just want to say how blessed and privileged I feel to be sitting on stage with a group of leaders such as Reverend Cho, Claire, and Luis. And, I feel honored to be with you all today, and I look forward to working with you all in the near future. And so for those of you who are not familiar with the Alliance to End Hunger, I'll give you a brief history. We were established in 2001 as a platform for both secular and faith organizations. We were actually established by Bread for the World to join together in the fight against hunger. Over the last 19 years, though, I will say that we've grown up. We've grown to become our own organization with nearly 100 members that include corporations, nonprofits, faith-based organizations, universities, foundations, international organizations, and individuals. And really what makes the Alliance unique is that the center of our work is our mission to build the public and political will to end hunger. We believe that America has the tools it needs to end hunger across the country. That is what drives us, what brings groups to wanting to join the Alliance. But what really makes us effective, I would say, is actually the tremendous contributions that our members, such as the Congressional Hunger Center, Bread for the World, and Feeding America, and other partners such as FRAC bring to the table, particularly when it comes to advocating for anti-hunger policy. The fact that all our organizations bring our strengths to the table really is what makes our community strong. And the fact we bring our talents to the table is what makes us strong. And to just give you a recent example, just recently, as we are dealing with the COVID crisis, our organizations were able to come together and really advocate on policies that would respond to the food security needs surrounding the current health and economic crisis. The Alliance was able to lead the effort, but in strong partnership with PRAC, Feeding America, Bread for the World, and others, we were able to bring a group together and meet routinely to talk about strategy, share information, and implement an action plan. And this has turned into some significant results. Earlier this year, we were able to put together two letters, a letter with over 800 signatures for both organizations and individuals, urging for a boost in SNAP benefits. These letters went to Congress as well as to the administration. And that recommendation turned into legislative language, which was included in the House bill, the House COVID relief bill, which is now under consideration in the Senate and hopefully will be part of a larger package in this congressional lame duck. But that's just an example, to me, a real life example of how collective voice can move policy. That is what, to be honest, for the groups that are here at this conference, that is why you are here, to really learn how to have your voice to turn policy and to really make a difference. Your collective advocacy voice is absolutely essential. It's been essential over the past few months, and we're going to need to continue to really expand from that, strengthen and build from the work that you've been able to do, because the fight isn't over. Even if we do get what we want in a final COVID bill, there's still a new Congress in 2021. We have a new administration in 2021. And quite frankly, there'll be other priorities competing for attention. And so while they're going to be competing for congressional and policymakers' attention, there's still going to be millions of Americans who are still trying to figure out how to put food on the table. And so we're going to need your voice to really help to strengthen that. We're going to have to continue to press on and not rest on our individual victories. Because in the words of my former boss, the late Congressman John Lewis, ours is not the struggle of one day, 1 week, or 1 year. Ours is not the struggle of one judicial appointment or a presidential term. Ours is a struggle of a lifetime, or maybe even many lifetimes. And it's each one of us in every generation, we must all do our part. And so that's my pledge to you, is that as leader of the Alliance to End Hunger, I'm going to work with our members to do our part to really help move this mission forward and really create a hunger-free nation.
Thanks, Eric. Let's move to Reverend Cho. And I think you're next in line in terms of tenure. But tell us more about Bread for the World and your unique contribution, again, to this unprecedented time that we're in around fighting food insecurity in this country.
Yes, thank you so much. I'm so glad that I'm no longer the newbie in DC. Welcome, Eric, in your role. Congratulations. If I look a little distracted right now, it's because I'm looking out the window and it's the first glimpse of sun in over a week here in Seattle. So please excuse me if I soak in a little vitamin D as I'm talking. There's so much that I'd like to share, but I think with limited time and obviously a desire for us to have some additional dialogue, I thought what I would do maybe is share maybe just really quickly 4 unique things about Bread for the World. Bread for the World is a Christian collective voice urging our lawmakers to end hunger in our nation and around the world. We both work in domestic issues and international issues, and we don't work exclusively with faith-based or Christian organizations, but we also make it very clear that that's our motivation. It's our why. We believe, as a result of our faith in Christ, that every single human being deserves human dignity. It's for that reason we join with all of my colleagues here and others who might be participating on this call. We're eager and willing to work with anyone and everyone that believes that every single human being matters. So as a result, the third unique part about our identity is that we're very grassroots. While our work in DC with our experts and our policy analysts are very important, we also deem our work with our activists, our pastors, our indigenous leaders that are on the ground in their particular context, who understand their situation better than any of us can possibly understand. We believe that grassroots is very, very important as it comes along, juxtaposes itself to the whole grass tops work. So we're proud to say that we partner with about 3,500 churches. And I think we should also just acknowledge and name the fact that Christians, for better or for worse, the church, for better or for worse, is a large voting bloc here in the United States. And depending on who you're listening to, they get their share of both praise or criticism. But there's also so many people that don't understand why advocacy matters. For me as a pastor, I believe that advocacy is part of our Christian witness to the larger world. And so there's a lot of education and inspiration that goes on into our larger work. And then the last thing about our unique identity is that it's not really unique. We work in coalitions, trying to advance policies that we believe will inform policies that ultimately impact people. So for the time being, I'll stop right there. And thank you again for having me on the call.
Thank you. Claire, we're all in awe of what your organization and network of food banks and pantries is facing right now and how you're responding. What do you see right now as your all's primary role in this time that we're in and this fight that we're in?
Wow. Well, I hope that everyone who is participating in this event has heard about the remarkable network that I have the privilege to serve in. I'm Claire, CEO of Feeding America. But I will go ahead and maybe give a little context for how it is that we are organized. It's our privilege to serve along with 200 member food banks that are spread out across the United States, over 60,000 agency partners, meal programs, and in normal times, over 2 million volunteers. I often say that Feeding America is where hunger is. And I know this audience is keenly aware that there is not one county or parish, I always add that one because yes, I am from Louisiana, in this whole great nation of ours, is immune to food insecurity. And therefore our reach is where people are who need us. Something that may distinguish us among this illustrious panel, who, by the way, I'm really privileged that I get the chance to participate with, is that Feeding America, while it does engage in advocacy, and that's absolutely critical to our work, and we're so excited that we had the opportunity to be a part of a wonderful coalition that actually got some things done in this moment of uber partisanship. So that's a lot to be said for that. In addition to the advocacy work that we do, we actually provide food throughout the United States and funds. And we also have a research arm as well as a programmatic arm. As a consequence, I believe that Feeding America is uniquely positioned not only to know whom it is that faces hunger, but why, and to solve for those types of solutions that will ultimately lead to the a hunger-free America, which is our vision. I think it might also be important to note that since this pandemic began, to give you a sense of scale, well, let me back it up just one step and say, I think all of us are aware that we'd finally gotten to pre-recession rates of food insecurity according to the USDA in 2018, and the number had slipped yet a little bit again. We made a little bit more progress in 2019. Our estimates are that as a result of this pandemic, that the numbers of people who are going to face food insecurity is going to soar to more than 50 million people in this country, of all countries. We can do something about it. All of us together are doing something about it. I'm optimistic about where we're going to go. But just since this pandemic began, from March 1st through September 30th, our network was able to provide nearly 4 billion meals to people in need. So I'm excited that that I get to be associated with this group, the panel, and definitely our members. And I'm also eager to move on in this program so that we can talk about some of the interventions that are necessary to alleviate some of the suffering that's out there. There's a lot of it. Thanks for having me.
Thank you, Claire. Let's turn to Luis and learn more about FRAC and your perspective on FRAC's unique contributions to this coalition.
Yes, thanks, Shannon. Again, thanks so much for the opportunity to join our great partners here again on our virtual stage. So FRAC, it's interesting. FRAC has been around for quite some time, over 50 years. We're celebrating our 50th year anniversary. I, like many of us here on the screen, am relatively new. I came from a background of working in international development, agricultural and food policy issues on the international scene. But ever since I started, it's just been at the eve of COVID. We've seen so much change in our world, as we know, and but throughout its history, FRAC has always had an important role, and we continue to feel we have an important role. We played an important role in expanding SNAP and the school meals programs. We were on the ground floor of establishing the WIC program, and we continue to do a lot of work on these programs, as I mentioned, throughout the pandemic, primarily through research and advocacy, and of course working with partners like the ones we have on the screen here today, and also hundreds of others in our network of state and local anti-hunger groups. And certainly the COVID-19 crisis has, as we've heard from our other panelists, forgive me if you hear the sirens, it's really exacerbated the crisis. And we've recently put out a report called Not Enough to Eat, where we took a look at some of the census pulse data in the early parts of the pandemic to illustrate the depth and breadth of the pain. And like I'm sure we'll be talking about, there were some alarming figures there, not least of which was the disproportionate effect that the pandemic has had on communities of color. And in that report, we found, for example, that 1 in 5 Black and Latinx adults with children sometimes or often didn't have enough to eat. So this takes what we've all seen and what we've all kind of been observing in terms of food insecurity one step further, and we're looking at food insecurity coming home to roost on the doorstep of folks. People are actually foregoing food. The meal patterns are being disrupted. So that's been quite alarming for us. And as Claire was noting, we had seen some progress, but the COVID has really quickly undone a lot of that in the early part of the year. And we are very, very concerned, as I'm sure everybody is, that things will only get worse as we approach the winter months, and we still don't have the action we need from Congress to boost these benefits. We do, as we think about the season and we look back, we are thankful for some advances. The folks on the screen here and the work that they've done has been tremendous, and we've received some initial relief through the Families First Coronavirus Act, the CARES Act. We had great success with pandemic EBT earlier in the year, where families have funds that they can use for food when their children participate in low and free school meals programs. But more work needs to be done, and we were happy to see a boost make its way into the HEROES Act. But we're really hoping that even in the lame duck Congress, that we can see some action for much needed COVID relief. But we need to do this together as a community. We're so we're very privileged to be part of this group. We've worked with Bread for the World for decades, going back to some of the WIC work I mentioned, and Claire and Feeding America have been such great partners. Claire was actually the very first person I met outside of any FRAC staff. I was on my first day on the job at our anti-hunger policy conference that we jointly host. And so it's just been, thank you for that warm welcome. And Eric, great to see a new face join the leadership of our group. So we're all in it together, but we feel we still have quite a bit of work to do.
Yeah. At the Hunger Center, we try to educate next generation leaders on the various approaches and levers for social change, and that they're all needed, from direct service to organizing to research to advocacy. And I think this group and your leadership reflects that across this movement. You all have come into your roles either on the cusp or during like a crisis in this country. But as new leaders, one of the benefits often of stepping into a new organization is asking lots of questions, having new perspectives, new insights, and maybe seeing opportunities for your organization to do something better or different, or maybe more collaboratively to have more impact. I'm curious if there are different approaches or insights you've had and that might take your organizations in a new direction, or you might be looking to try some new things given the world we're living in right now, and just some of your insights as you've stepped into these leadership roles. Let's start, Claire, with you. Any changes or insights that you've had, or changes in approach that Feeding America has taken or considered, in light of today?
No, absolutely. Absolutely. Let me start with maybe a metaphor that I often use in connection with COVID-19 and this moment that we find ourselves in, which is that of a storm, a perfect storm with so many different things impacting the same vulnerable communities in such stark terms, inordinately so. There is, I believe, at least an opportunity for silver linings coming out of all of this pain. And I think one of them is that the challenges around communities of color were hidden in plain sight before COVID-19. The statistics, which we started talking about a little bit already, Luis did, around the fact that if you're a person of color in this country, you are 2 times more likely not only to suffer from the comorbidities that make COVID-19, the disease, more lethal, but also 2 times more likely, at least, to suffer with food insecurity. So all of those things have come to light, and it did so at a time when we couldn't look away as a country. And I believe that that creates a unique opportunity for us to now do some things about it. I know that at Feeding America, our commitment to equity has only been deepened as a result of the various things that have happened throughout the course of this pandemic. And our plan is to work on equity, diversity, and inclusion from inside and out. On the inside, there's much for us to do to become a more equitable, a more diverse, and a more inclusive organization at the national office. It starts with me, and I'm dedicated to doing better and being better in the space. We also created a brand new office, and it was right before COVID, in fact. Amy McReynolds is the great leader who occupies that office, and it's the Equity and Programs Office. We did that by design, that we would combine our programmatic work with an equity lens, because they should be part and parcel. And at Feeding America, they are and they will be. So that work is critically important, and I believe that we will be a better organization and provide more meaningful impact on people facing hunger as a result of that new heightened focus on EDI. A second thing is that right before everyone's eyes, we had to turn on a dime and really change our distribution model. Historically, we could rely upon congregate feedings. Everybody comes together, sometimes, usually among some of our partner agencies. When I mentioned that 60,000 partner agencies with whom we partner, they'd come there and we'd provide food in those environments. Based upon CDC guidelines and our desire to make certain that the people that we serve are safe, as well as those members of our organization and our partners who are providing that service to them, that they all need to be safe, we had to come up with new low contact distribution models. So that's where you see those drive-through food big lines at food banks, and the food bankers themselves are occupying an even stronger presence on the front lines of that work. It exposed some of the capacity challenges that some of our partners have, and we will go back better. We're going to make even more investments in that capacity, and we're going to learn from some of the efficiencies that we've been able to glean. And then finally, we've always understood that policy was absolutely critical to this work, because if we are, in fact, as we are, dedicated to helping people facing hunger, we know that it's through policy that we can do so much. We know that for every one meal that our remarkable network is able to provide, that SNAP, as an example, can provide 9. We are going to double down on policy and do the things that are necessary, along with partners like the other members of this panel, to make certain that with this heightened consciousness, that we really leverage this moment for people facing hunger.
Thanks, Claire. Reverend Cho, new approaches or directions you foresee Bread for the World taking?
Well, thanks again for the question. I just noticed that my predecessor is on this call, David Beckman, and so I have to first give him a big shout out and thank him for his tremendous leadership for nearly 30 years at Bread for the World. In addition to building so much of what's already been instituted in the 46 years, a couple things come to mind. It's not necessarily new things, but I think it's an opportunity for certainly my leadership and perhaps others on the call to double down, to lean in, to be that much more committed, and to be more perhaps innovative to a fast changing time. But a couple ideas come to mind. Number one is, I think at Bread for the World, I am so confident and so proud of the work that we're doing, but I don't always feel like we tell our stories well. And what I mean by stories is that I think we have to be very careful that we're not indirectly somehow creating poor people or those who experience hunger into projects. I'm mindful of this fantastic quote by the Nigerian novelist Chimamanda Adichie Ngozi, who gives a fabulous talk on the TED Talks. And she talks about something called the dangers of a singular story. And whether we like it or not, I do think that there are people, many, sometimes perhaps even our organizations indirectly, that somehow give a unidimensional perspective of these human beings, our neighbors, our family members, created in God's image through that singular lens of scarcity of food. So I think we have to do a better job, all of us, in telling the story, in dignifying the story, in humanizing the story. And there's so much more that we can unpack with that. But the second thing that I would say connected to that is, how do we use the new technologies, new media, social media? How do we use innovation to be able to advance those things and to welcome more people into this fight of trying to end hunger in our nation and around the world? You've heard every single panelist say this. We're all applauding coalition. We're all applauding partnerships. And it's because we know that no one single organization can do this alone. As fantastic as the organizations represented on this panel are, there's no way that we can do this alone. So we just need every single person to take one more deeper step into fighting for, into advocating for those who experience hunger. The fact that in 2020, it's not just COVID, obviously, as Claire shared, COVID has exposed certain things that have been there, but the hunger crisis has been a reality in our nation prior to this as well, in the year 2020, pre-COVID. So as we're all talking about going back to what was before COVID, we actually can't afford to go back to what was normal. We actually have to go beyond that, a better, more fresh imagination, again, of equity and inclusivity. Last thing that I'll say is that I think, Shannon, you mentioned this, that in our very polarized political landscape, it might not feel always like the best thing to do, but I do believe it's so important that we maintain our commitment to work in bipartisan efforts. again, challenging in the world and in the context that we live in. And I'm really grateful for my previous predecessors at Bread for the World that made that a hallmark at Bread for the World. And we want to continue to work in bipartisan ways. We don't want to vilify or demonize people that might think differently on certain matters. To my knowledge, in my short 9 months here at Bread, I have not met anyone in Congress that that does not want to do good works to help those who experience hunger. We see things differently. The sense of urgency is different, but we want to be able to, again, speak to every single person that this is a human rights issue that all of us should be a part of.
Thank you. Luis, what new insights, approaches, directions have you thought about or might we see at FRAC?
Forgive me. Yeah, thanks again for the question. You know, as I mentioned, so much has happened at the onset of my tenure here at FRAC. One of the things that we did is we said, you know, given all this change, both due to COVID, we had a great moment of racial reckoning in our country. We've had a very toughly fought election season as well. So we had all these things that are kind of contributing to a lot of change and tumult around us. And one of the things that I felt that was important is for us to do a bit of a reset at FRAC and to think about where what assets we're bringing and how we're going to deploy them. And clearly, our 50-year history is an asset. We also have to look at where that can limit us and how we can generate new thinking. And as I mentioned before, we have a great network of hundreds of anti-hunger advocates from around the country that we also want to work very closely to address some of these issues. And among these issues, the things we kind of kept coming back to were root causes of poverty. How do we deal with issues like the lack of jobs, lack of fair wages, inaccessibility to housing, and clearly a tremendous history and burden of over 400 years of systematic racism that we need to reverse and work towards righting those wrongs. But we were able to come together with a new vision to look towards a time where we could have people have access to adequate and dignified sources of food. And we grouped together some of these goals in a few categories. Clearly, first is working to continue to strengthen the federal food nutrition programs. As I mentioned before, the need to work very closely, not just with folks at the federal level, but at the state and local level. Thirdly, looking at the holistic view of hunger, as I mentioned before. That was a very big and important point for us. Fourthly, we actually took a step further to call out reducing the racial hunger gap that we spoke to before, and that we've clearly seen through some of the research and the figures that we've been talking about. And as been mentioned by some folks as well, is looking at how we bring more people into this fight. Our issue has had a lot of national attention early on during the pandemic. We want to make sure that even in a fragmented and very crowded landscape, that message continues, and particularly the messages of the strength of community, the strength of advocacy, that those messages don't get drowned out. And so we'll be looking to put some emphasis and some investments behind those points.
And Eric, first 90 days, not even first 90 days on the job, any new insights or approaches or directions you foresee the Alliance taking? You're on mute.
It's actually been 14 days on the job. So, but in this capacity, I mean, there's three things I definitely coming into this position I wanted to do on behalf of the Alliance and help increase the Alliance's presence. First and foremost, I mean, the Alliance is a diverse organization and we have it, which gives us the ability to bring multiple voices to the table, particularly when we're speaking to policymakers. But quite frankly, we still need to diversify our membership and really broaden our tent. And I think that's the common theme that you see here, or that you've heard with our panelists. Particularly for me, my goal is to really bring in more organizations that come from underrepresented communities or represent communities of color. As a graduate of Howard University, obviously, partnering with historically Black colleges and universities is something that's a priority of mine. We work with Auburn University and a number of other universities, but I want to bring in I want to bring HBCUs and Hispanic serving institutions into the fold, mainly because they have a population base that is living, that have come from food insecure households, who understand what it's like to come from a family that may be trying to figure out how to put food on the table. And so being able to bring that voice to the table ensures that the conversation that we're talking about comes from when we talk about looking at a racially equitable lens. Those are the different things that we want to be able to do when we are talking to policymakers. I also want to diversify and broaden our membership as it relates to corporations and businesses. We had a great business panel yesterday, but they made a great point. Looking at how do we bring more groups and organizations and companies into this fold that are outside of the food industry or the food services industry. And so, I want to be able to open those doors to allow housing companies, banking institutions, groups that have constituencies that are impacted by the economy, that are impacted by some of the root causes of hunger, being able to bring them in, because one, it gives a different perspective it shows that this is not just a certain silo of organizations that are in support of ending hunger in this country, but this really is a multi-sector concern. It really is a national concern. And it also allows us to insert our message into some of the things that they're trying to pursue. I would love to be able to go to the Capitol Hill and talk to our policymakers, even our local policymakers, our governors and our state legislatures, and bring multiple sectors into the room to say why it's important for us to support both state and national anti-hunger initiatives and policies. And so I want to be able to broaden that tent and be able to do that. And I also want to we are a membership organization. And so I want to identify ways to amplify and lift up the work that our members are doing. Because again, as it relates to policymakers, all politics are local. And so I want to identify opportunities where I can actually let our organizations show what they're doing in their communities and the work that they're impacting with the constituents of the policymakers who we are talking to. And so I'm going to be, over the next 6 months, ramping up our advocacy efforts, both on domestic policy as well as international policy, because the Alliance does focus on both. And I'll be using that as an opportunity to really let our members shine.
Shannon, you're on mute.
We have 7 minutes remaining. I'm going to switch things up and throw out 2 questions and do a speed round for everyone to answer. The first question is, what opportunities do you foresee for ending hunger with the Biden-Harris administration? And are there any things you hope they might take up on day one? So let's start with Reverend Cho and work our way around.
Well, for the sake of time, I'll just give a really quick answer. We're really hopeful and expectant that they will take COVID as seriously as they have been speaking and articulating before the elections and now post the elections. I think as they take that seriously, our hope is that there are that multifaceted response of how we can engage those who are being deeply impacted by the coronavirus. I'll pass it on to my next colleague.
Claire, anyone to chime in who wants to answer? Oh, I don't think.
I'll jump in if that's okay. Shannon.
Yeah, Claire's talking, but her mic, we can't hear you. Something's happened with your voice. So Eric, and then we'll see if we can hear you again.
Sure. Just real quickly, if we're unable to if we're unable to successfully get the language that we want in the final COVID package, or if there isn't a final COVID package until 2021, one of the first things out the bat, we want to ensure that the administration, includes language that provides the 15% boost to SNAP, and as well as improvements to the WIC program to ensure that there's better access to the program for those who need to use it. And then moving forward, just to answer your question, I see that, yes, I do think, based on what we've heard during the campaigns, I'm very optimistic about what this administration is saying that they're going to do. I like the fact that they're prioritizing racial disparities, because to me, those are some of the root causes to hunger. And so looking at the economy, looking at systematic racism, gender inequalities, all those different things, for me, helps put us in the path to ending hunger.
I'm going to give this another try. Can you guys hear me this time?
Yes.
Awesome. Great. So I agree with everything everyone else said. And let me just amplify one thing. I actually hope that we're not quite so incremental as that 15%. When you think about what that really means in the lives of people facing hunger, it's inadequate for the moment. I hope this administration actually assesses where people really are, and then makes meaningful progress toward helping people to truly, in a sustainable way, elevate out of food insecurity. One of the other things I wanted to say, I'm going to try to be quick about it, is I failed to mention this, and I think it's so critically important that we, and I think all of us, really need to do a better job of elevating the voices of the people that we actually serve. And that's something that Feeding America is going to be working on, giving our microphone and our platform to people who are in fact experiencing hunger, rather than feeling that we're the better arbiter of what we should be saying on their behalf. So thank you, guys.
Thank you. Louise, I'm going to close out and ask you if you want to add anything to that, but I'm going to ask you one more question, and then again, others can chime in too. So we'll hear from you on the Biden administration, but also, I look at the faces in this panel, and you all represent the most diverse leadership of national anti-hunger movement to date. Why do you think that's important to the sector and as we move forward?
Well, it's incredibly important. I think one, it's taken a long time to get to this point, but we know we need to do better. As it's been said before, we need to have leadership, not just at the national level, but with our state and local partners, that really reflects the people who we serve. And we know, as we were talking about before, that there are tremendous barriers, a lot of them based on systematic racism. And the more we can get folks who represent the communities that we serve, the better and more effective our programs will be. And in terms of the Biden-Harris leadership, just 3 buckets quickly. Yes, boost SNAP, that is so critically important. Strengthen, and also strengthen the child nutrition programs. Look at all the various root causes that we talked about before: systematic racism, jobs, wages, things like that. And also look at ways that the federal government programs could be more consumer friendly, more consumer facing, and work better together across various agencies that have related concerns.
I want to jump in on Luis's comments around diversity. And I have a really simple way of looking at it, and it's informed by my whole career so far. Diverse teams win. And over 50 million people are counting on us to win at this. That's why it'd be diverse. It's the same reason that every sector should be diverse, is because diverse teams win.
Absolutely right.
Well, we have time for one last question and maybe a motivation for our audience. I think I've been kind of blown away by, I think I hear a lot of alignment from each of you and a lot of recognition of the need to broaden this coalition and just the unique partners and communities that each organization brings to the table and the competencies around service, research, organizing, and advocacy are all represented in your organizations and your leadership. What do the people on this call, the people who've been attending the summit, what are some actions that they can do, they can take to help us get to that finish line, to help push for some of these changes that we've been wanting to see and haven't in terms of dealing with this pandemic? What's your advice for people who are joining us today? Eugene.
Great. Well, gosh, so much that I can say. I want to quickly, if I may, to go one question back. I just want to again highlight that diversity matters because it also reflects the reality of our country. Our country is an immensely diverse nation. So in other words, I don't think we should be elevating diversity for the sake of diversity. It reflects the reality of what our nation is. And representation matters. So again, I'm just so honored to be on this call with others. You know, as for a word of maybe motivation, I think the word that comes to me, and I'm not trying to sound preachy, and if I do, please excuse me. I am a pastor here, but the word that comes to me is the word hope. And I think all of us need a word of hope, wherever we may come from or wherever we draw our sense of hope. So for me, as a person of faith who believes in God, who believes in the person of Jesus, I'm convicted and encouraged during a time of exhaustion, during a time of pandemic, during a time of racial injustice that impacts all of us, during a time of suffering, during a time of sickness. I have to resist exhaustion and cynicism and choose the path of hope. And part of the reason why I have hope is my colleagues that are on this call, every participant that are here, and so many that are part of our respective organizations that are saying, we choose abundance over scarcity. We choose hope over fear. We choose love our neighbors rather than hating our neighbors. And so I would just want to encourage every single person. Yes, it's important to self-care, but as we also self-care, let's buckle up because the work is ongoing and there's so much work to be done.
Others, anyone want to add to
I would, I would echo that sentiment as well. It reminds me of one of my quotes from one of my heroes, Nelson Mandela, who reminded us that we think about poverty, hunger, and particularly poverty-related hunger. Poverty is such an enormous driver of it. Poverty is not natural; it's man-made, and so not only should we have that sense of hope, there are ways to fix this. We know how to get this done, and we should not be shy about leaning into it. That's why I'm so supportive of the work everybody here is doing, and supportive of the advocacy work because we all can do it. We can hold our leaders accountable to that. They answer to us, and it's through their efforts that we'll get this done together as brothers and sisters in this fight together.
So we are at time, and I am hopeful. We are living in unprecedented times, but because of, I think, just the leadership we have here, and I am hopeful that we're going to see unprecedented change come out of this. And I'm really thankful for your leadership. And thank you for joining us today, and thank everyone for joining, and to the Alliance and its sponsors for making this first ever virtual Hunger-Free Community Summit possible to, I think, more than 600 people across the country. So kudos on adapting. And it's just been a pleasure to see you all today and to know that we're in this together. So thank you all.
This was great.
Thank you, Shannon. What an inspirational panel. Wow. And I'm just reflecting on the entire 2 days, and what an amazing 2 days in this time of COVID when we're all so physically distanced from each other. This summit has re-energized me, reminded me why our collective work is so important, and inspires me to keep going, keep educating, keep collaborating, and keep advocating. So thank you. Hello everyone. This is Minerva Delgado again from the Alliance to End Hunger, and I'm here to wrap things up. So I have lots of people to thank, and I believe, Sam, we have a PowerPoint, but I'd like to start just really by expressing my thanks to everyone who's been involved in the summit. Our keynotes, especially Senator Bozeman, Senator Babineaux, Lillian Singh from Prosperity Now, and Graham Christensen, and all of our brilliant presenters, our behind the scenes magicians. I'd like to thank Heidi and Sam and Josh and the rest of the team at Swaim Strategies. We really couldn't have done this without them. When we started thinking about a virtual conference, we had no idea what we were doing. So thank you, Swaim. I'd also like to thank the Alliance staff. I know you've seen a lot of me over the last 2 days, but I definitely didn't plan this by myself. Olivia has been my right hand, and the rest of the team, Nate, Danielle, and Unique, you're such rock stars. Thank you so much. And thank you to our sponsors. So Shannon generously thanked our sponsors, but neglected to say that Congressional Hunger Center is actually one of our sponsors as well. So thank you to Congressional Hunger Center, General Mills, Share Our Strength, Feeding America, Islamic Relief USA, Bread for the World, and the Covia Solutions. And we are going to ask for your feedback. We do always do a survey. This time it will be virtual. We're going to ask you to fill out a link, which we are, and don't worry, we're going to post it online. We're going to email it to you. But I do ask that you do the survey as soon as you can, just to give us that fresh feedback and fresh perspective. I promise you, we use those evaluations when we plan these events. And especially since this is a new virtual environment, we really want to hear from you. And did you like it? Would you like to do this again? Or do you want to go back when it's safe to an in-person conference? So as well as what you thought of the content and anything you want us to include in content for next year. So please, please, please give us your feedback. So what's next? You know, yes, I've asked for your evaluations, and please submit those as soon as possible. And we will post all of the recorded sessions on our website. It will live at the Alliance to End Hunger website. We will collect all of the recordings, all of the PowerPoints, all of the resources that have been shared, and organize them on our website. We won't be able to do that overnight, so please be patient with us, but we will email everyone when that is up on our website, so you can see any of the sessions you might have missed, or review the information or share it with others. So we're happy to email you when that's up and running. And finally, if you're new to the Alliance, if you're new to the Hunger Free Communities Network, if you want to learn how to join us, how to be part of our advocacy work, how to be part of the Hunger Free Communities Network, just reach out to me. My email is there. Or Olivia, you have her email as well. We've emailed you so many times. I'm sure you have them both memorized. But please reach out to us at the Alliance to End Hunger. And we'd love to hear from you and learn how we can partner with you and connect with you if we're not already in partnership. So thank you. And I think I will let our Executive Director, Eric Mitchell, have the final word. I will say good night and thank you very much. Eric, did we lose Eric?
Yeah, I'm here. Thanks.
Okay,
thanks.
there you go.
Thanks, Minerva. And just to reiterate, we really, really appreciate your support in joining the summit. I hope you enjoyed the last 2 days. It's been very educational for me coming in. We look forward to working with you. We look forward to partnering with you over the next few months and beyond. And if you need anything from us, as Minerva said, feel free to reach out to us. Thank you again.